In today's video, we are going to discuss the top MBA related interview questions and how to answer them. Hi everyone, welcome to Insider Gyaan. My name is Soumi. I am an IIT Delhi and ISB Hyderabad grad and इस channel पे मैं अपने career related experiences share करती हूँ. I do make a lot of content on MBA related stuff. I have actually mentored more than 100 MBA aspirants as well. So if any of those things interest you, please consider subscribing to the channel. So on this channel, मैंने MBA essays के बारे में बहुत सारा content बनाया है. But one thing that I have not covered in detail are what are the different MBA interview questions and how do you address them. आज के वीडियो में वही सब कवर करने वाले हैं. 5 कैटेगरीज ऑफ क्वेश्चंस है मेरे हिसाब से, या फिर 5 टाइप्स के क्वेश्चंस जो सबसे ज़्यादा कॉमन होते हैं MBA इंटरव्यूज़ में. सो आई एम गोइंग टू गिव यू दोज एंड दीज आर लाइक द मस्ट prepare questions for you during your MBA interviews, and after that I'm also going to tell you how do you address them, like some tips and tricks on how you can address them. The first and the most common question is, tell me about yourself. This shouldn't even come as a surprise क्योंकि हर कोई इंटरव्यू, चाहे MBA इंटरव्यू हो या जॉब इंटरव्यू हो, यूजुअली इसी क्वेश्चन से स्टार्ट करते हैं. Now, how do you address this? How do you keep it interesting without going into too many details but still highlight the key points? I have a kind of a framework for it. I think you should keep it strictly to 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes, no more than that. Start by sharing a little bit about your background. थोड़ा अपने background के बारे में बताओ. उसके बाद बहुत ज़्यादा डिटेल में अपना काम समझाने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. Maybe you can just talk a little bit about 1 or 2 highlights, which you want to draw the interviewer's attention towards. It could be projects, internships, or it could also be any kind of awards or positions of responsibility that you have held in workplace. It's always good to start with academics or workplace related things. After that, you talk very slightly, like 1 or 2 lines about your SOP, like MBA के लिए क्यों अप्लाई कर रहे हो, without again going into too much of detail. And lastly, you always close it with something interesting about you, like a passion that you might be having or something that can stay at the back of the interviewer's mind, कि oh ये बंदा, I don't know, he has traveled to 24 countries. That's an interesting fact about you. So end it with something interesting which can bring it to a good closure and shows that you have different layers to your personality, and it also is enough to give a highlight about you to the interviewer without going into too many details. Now उस question को end करते time you can always say that so this is a little bit about me. Now if anything you found interesting, I am happy to share more details about it. That's how I usually end most of my tell me about yourself questions. Moving on to part 2, which is the MBA goals related questions. ये सबसे ज़्यादा common question है, and IIM हो या ISB हो या International Business School, so this is a question that you will always get either in the form of essays and definitely during your interview. So it's better to prepare all kind of aspects of it in different ways and really well. So what are the different MBA goals related essays that you will be asked? कि तुम्हें MBA क्यों करना है? Why do you want to do MBA? Why now? अभी क्यों करना है? Why this specific school? मतलब इस स्कूल से ऐसा क्या एडिशनल मिलेगा तुम्हें कि you are applying to this school? And lastly, what are your short term and your long term goals? So जब पहले के क्वेश्चंस आप आंसर करोगे, शॉर्ट टर्म एंड लॉन्ग टर्म गोल्स को थोड़ा बहुत आपको एड्रेस करना ही पड़ेगा, बट जनरली इट्स ऑलवेज गुड टू थिंक अबाउट व्हाट यू वांट टू डू राइट आफ्टर योर MBA एंड 5 to 7 years down the line where you see yourself, like a decent picture. How do you address this type of question? Number 1 is very important to keep it realistic and achievable. कि तुम्हें MBA क्यों करना है, MBA के बाद के जो तुम्हारे goals है, if it is achievable or not. Like just to give you an example, तुम मान लो you have 10 years of experience in IT, okay, and then your short-term goal is to move to finance outside after MBA. That's a very unrealistic goal. Like people will have so many questions कि अच्छा आईटी से अचानक फाइनेंस कैसे, इंटरेस्ट कैसे डेवलप हुआ, उस इंटरेस्ट को एक्सप्लोर करने के लिए तुमने किया है कि नहीं कुछ अभी तक, 10 साल के एक्सपीरियंस के बाद तुम फाइनेंस में जाओगे तो ऑब्वियसली इट विल बी एक्सपेक्टेड दैट यू हैव सम काइंड ऑफ नॉलेज, डू यू रियली हैव दैट और नॉट. सो ये सारे क्वेश्चंस आएंगे. सो दिस इज नॉट अ रियलिस्टिक goal to explain. Now, what is a realistic goal? Here, you need to keep in mind that whatever you have done pre-MBA has some kind of relationship to your post-MBA goals. मतलब किसी तरह से you are able to pick up what you have learned pre-MBA, be it in college or be it in during your work ex, depending on whether you are a fresher or a working professional, how you can connect it to your post-MBA goals. जस्ट टू गिव यू एन एग्जाम्पल, वही टेक से फाइनेंस वाला एग्जाम्पल ले लेते हैं. मे बी you say that I have worked as an IT professional, but most of the work that I have done has been towards financial services clients like banks. While I was working there, I got a very good sense of the operating models of banks, and now that I have a good understanding, I really want to move to a finance company and play a whatever XYZ role in that company. Also, to establish that you have some interest, maybe you have taken some like certification courses just to see whether you are good enough or not. And then during the MBA, you want to use that time to develop your finance knowledge, to get formal education. Also use the MBA as a platform to get into a finance company. Now that is how you are sort of showing a path, going into the details and showing a path कि तुमने MBA के पहले क्या किया है. That has a very strong relationship to what you have done post MBA. So it's important to show that. Thirdly, always talk about the skill set gaps that the MBA school can help you mitigate. It can be a platform, it can be a good professional network, it can be a brand name, it can be peer learning, it can be a specific course, it can be practical learning, it can be an internship, it can be a lot of things, but it's important for you to show that right now to achieve your post MBA goal, there are certain gaps which the MBA can help you mitigate. Lastly, to address the question of why this school specifically, इस phase के लिए it's very important that you do a lot of research, talk to alums, go into the specifics of that school. कोई specific programs है कि नहीं, say entrepreneurship related या फिर कोई organizational behavior related or healthcare related, whichever field you are interested in. Maybe you know of some really good professors, maybe you know of some interesting student clubs that you want to be a part of. So try to focus a little bit on those things as well in your goals related answers, क्योंकि उससे ना कॉलेज को ये फील आता है कि एक जेनेरिक किसी भी MBA स्कूल में जाने वाले बंदे नहीं हो तुम. You have actually thought this through, you have tailored your application, customized your application to that specific school, and generally you are interested because you have done a lot of research about that school. Okay, so with that, moving on to part 3, the third kind of questions are going to be leadership related. Now, मैंने बहुत बार अपने वीडियोस में बताया है कि MBA schools definitely look for something, some leadership skills in you, some displayed leadership before MBA, because MBA के बाद तुम्हें expectation तुमसे ये है कि तुम directly managerial roles पे जाओगे. तो it's important that you have some of those leadership skills beforehand. So these type of questions are where you will directly or indirectly be asked about your different leadership examples. It could be a time when you displayed excellent leadership skills, something as direct as that, or it could be what you think are some of the good qualities of a good leader, or things like have you displayed good stakeholder management in the past, how do you handle failures or conflicts in a team, etc. So how do you answer leadership related questions? Number one, I always tell people not to confuse leadership with people management. कई लोगों को लगता है ना कि especially if you're a fresher, if you haven't managed people, you don't have any leadership skills, and that is so far from truth that I can't even. So basically people management is just one aspect of leadership, but ऐसे बहुत सारे और qualities होते हैं एक good leader के, like empathy, good stakeholder management, ability to manage conflicts successfully, being proactive and independently owning different pieces of work if you are especially if you are a junior person. So before sort of thinking that you don't have good leadership skills, I want you to think about all of these things before you come to any conclusion. And now, how do you address leadership related questions? The best way is to use examples. आप लोगों को बता सकते हो कि आप लीडरशिप में आप में एम्पैथी बहुत ज़्यादा है, यू लाइक लीडिंग बाय एग्जाम्पल एट्सेट्रा एट्सेट्रा, बट अनलेस यू शेयर सम एग्जाम्पल्स वे यू हैव डिस्प्लेड इट इन द पास्ट, इट इज़ ऑफ नो यूज़. लाइक बोलने को तो सब बोल सकते हैं, राइट? सो शोइंग रादर देन टेलिंग इज़ अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कॉन्सेप्ट. एंड वाइल एक्सप्लेनिंग एनी काइंड ऑफ एग्जाम्पल, you need to use the STAR framework. I have explained this framework on my channel before. I'll do that slightly once again. STAR basically is you start with the situation, then you explain the task at hand, then you explain the actions that you took, and lastly the results that you were able to bring. So 2 things to note here: examples and STAR framework. With that, moving on to part 4, which is the behavioral questions. Now, leadership is sort of a behavioral question, but I've kept it separate because leadership is one thing which you really want to focus on in your essays or your interview related questions. The other aspects of behavioral might come up, might not come up, but it's always good to be prepared, right? And what do I mean by these behavioral questions? ये हो गए आपके name your 3 skill sets that you have developed while working in consulting, whatever. Or what are your strengths? What are your development areas? Tell us about a challenging project that you may have delivered in the past. What were your learnings from there? What are the 3 things that you are going to bring to your peer group that your peers can learn from you during MBA? इस तरह के सारे questions. Now, behavioral questions answer करने के लिए पहली बात तो you use examples and you use the STAR framework, very similar to leadership. But also it's important for you to think about all those instances beforehand. So when you are preparing, for example, strengths and development areas के लिए, you need to think about 3 strengths that you have. You need to think about 3 development areas, and for each of them you need to think of 1 or 2 examples to support them. So it's a lot of examples and a lot of thinking through. So behavioral questions के लिए prepare करने के लिए I think majority of your time needs to go into brainstorming and going into a reflection mode कि तुम्हारे actual strengths क्या है और किस किस situations में तुमने वो display किया है, to put them on paper and then just like revise them so that interview में panic mode में तुम भूल ना जाओ अपने सारे examples. Another thing to note for behavioral questions and leadership also is the more recent examples that you give, the better it is, because that means तुम्हारे वो recent qualities है, and that holds a lot more importance than if you have displayed that thing say like 5 years back once in a while. The last category of questions are candidate specific, so it can be general awareness related questions, or it can be work ex specific related questions, or it could also be technical questions based on your background. It's important to note कि जो general awareness वाले questions है ना, वो usually IIMs या जो 2-year programs है इंडिया में वहीं पे पूछते हैं. Generally international business schools या ISB, they will not ask you general awareness related questions. That's also because a lot of the people who apply through CAT and to IIMs are freshers, and उनके पास इतना कुछ है भी नहीं डिस्कस करने के लिए, तो जनरल अवेयरनेस ही पूछ लेते हैं. जबकि जो वर्क एक्स वाले प्रोफेशनल्स होते हैं उनके पास they have a lot to discuss about your work ex, about the things that you have done at work, about the skills that you have learned, leadership you have displayed. So generally they focus on those things. अब जनरल अवेयरनेस के लिए my tip would be to not stress too much यार. मतलब generally aware रहो, हर दिन थोड़ा बहुत न्यूज़पेपर पढ़ते रहो, and especially if you have like a specific interest, say for instance तुम्हारे extra curriculums में you have basketball as something very heavily, maybe तुमने national level में खेला हुआ है, and maybe you are a musician or something, so you have a lot to write on music. Especially in those kind of cases, right, it's a little more important for you कि तुम थोड़ा generally aware हो about your areas of interest, because that might come up. एंड जनरल अवेयरनेस में ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है कि अगर आपको कुछ ना आए, मतलब आपको उस टाइम पे अगर नहीं आता हो, इट्स अ वेरी ब्लैक एंड वाइट थिंग, राइट? जनरल अवेयरनेस यू मे ईदर नो और यू मे नॉट नो. So rather than trying to take a guess, fumbling or something like that, it's totally okay to say, I'm sorry ma'am, or sir, I don't know about this, but I'll read up about it now that you have asked me. Something as simple as that. It's important to not panic and keep your calm. Now moving to the work ex related questions. Personally मुझे लगता है कि this should be the easiest section for anyone to handle, right? Because वर्क एक्स मतलब तुमने अगर कुछ काम किया है तो ऑब्वियसली तुम्हें पता ही होना चाहिए कि तुमने क्या किया है उस टाइम पे, एंड यू शुड हैव ऑल द एग्जाम्पल्स हैंडी. इफ़ यू आर फ्रॉम अ टेक्निकल फील्ड, आई थिंक इट्स ऑलवेज अ गुड आइडिया टू स्लाइटली ब्रश अप योर टेक्निकल स्किल्स, बट ऑल्सो wherever you have done some high impact work, it could be some deals that you have managed, or it could be some high impact projects that you have delivered. It's important for you to think about some instances from those places. What were your key learnings? And more importantly, to focus on what you did. Like, don't focus too much on the overall context, but thoda sa time spend karo context set करने में, and then very very soon move on to what you did, what your learnings were. सारा focus तुम पे होना चाहिए. So yeah, technically these are the 5 different categories of MBA related interview questions, and hopefully I've gotten some tips on how to answer them. अगर तुमने ये सब prepare कर लिया ना MBA interviews में, then I think you are pretty much set. So yeah, hope you guys liked this video. If you did, you know what to do. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, subscription and like इनसे बहुत फर्क पड़ता है. So please do that. And yes, I'm going to see you soon in the next one. Till then, bye.